Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Anthony Davis is on quite a heater these days. How does it change the way you think about his long-term future in LA? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcasts. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go and celebrate and engage with this play-in caliber team, Andy, that is in the top 10 and with over 13,000 subscribers to that channel. Really fun responses to our show for Wednesday with Harrison Fagan. Obviously, we spent a lot of time on Pau Gasol, which got us and a lot of people on the chat boards thinking about future jersey retirements and statues and things like that. So we're going to dive into that a little bit as the show goes on.
Well, Brian, just to be clear, and we'll get into this, it did not get just us thinking about it. It got the person we are going to be talking about thinking about it as well.
So there you go. We are in a situation now, Andy, where Anthony Davis, who is the person to whom you are talking about, is he's been the topic all year long in every kind of way. Like, we judge how he's playing when he's way up. He's obviously this guy who can carry a franchise. When he's down a little bit, we question, like, can you keep going with Anthony Davis as your franchise cornerstone? Can you give him another contract? Can you project out 3 or 4 years with him as the centerpiece of your team? The way he's playing now, where he is MVP caliber, it got me thinking, after the game, like what this does for that conversation. Like how does this Anthony Davis impact the way you think about his future? Because it's not like this makes him invulnerable to injury, but it changes the equation of what you're getting if you keep him.
Yes and no. I mean, the injuries are problematic because injuries are problematic, but they become doubly problematic when Anthony Davis is still playing alongside LeBron James, who will be in his 21st season next year with 1 billion miles on the odometer. And as we're seeing right now, because he is out for the foreseeable future, injuries are becoming all the more of a thing with LeBron. And it's only going to increase. It's not likely going to move backwards. So if LeBron is still going to be one of the focal points of your team, which he will be because he's LeBron, and because of LeBron's unique skill set, there's only so much you can dial back. Like even if, like we talked about before, you've really wanted Anthony Davis by now to have taken the metaphorical baton and be the metaphorical engine of the metaphorical car that LeBron is metaphorically steering, it's still going to be LeBron at the wheel, and he's going to have his fingerprints on a lot. And it's very different when he's in there. So he's going to need even more help, not less. So no matter how much you think what AD is doing right now is sustainable in terms of talent and will to make it happen, the injury question, because it's coupled with LeBron's injury questions and age, makes this just a very difficult question to confidently answer. And in some respects, it actually has nothing to do with his play.
Well, right. But no, it does. I disagree with that. And like, look, I think most fans,
in terms of whether or not it's viable, I think in certain respects, it doesn't have anything to do with his play.
Disagree about that. But like, I think, I think the most likely path and the smartest path that they have in front of them is to take what they've got right now, cross your fingers, and go into next season more or less with the group that they have. But 3 weeks ago, a month ago, whatever it is, the conversation would have sounded a lot different. Like, do you talk about, trying to trade Anthony Davis? You would have been trading him at the bottom of his value at that point. I guess
until he gets hurt again.
No, I'm saying when you did it, three weeks, a month ago, when he wasn't playing that well coming off an injury, Anthony Davis's value and perception around the league a month ago was as low as it could be.
Until the next injury, and then it gets lower.
Fine. But
the point is, if you're going to trade him from a place of disadvantage, you're going to be trading from a place of disadvantage.
Not necessarily. Not if he. But the flip side of that is, if let's say he plays and finishes the season playing like this, if you were, I guess, going to entertain the notion of trading Anthony Davis, it would never get better than that. You're never going to find a better opportunity to where people see what it means to have him, and he's coming off something where you're not trading him while he's hurt. So initially my thought was, before you could be trading him at a place of monumental disadvantage, if this goes through to the end of the year and he doesn't suffer some sort of big injury or whatever, knock on wood, for all sorts of reasons, I guess you could look at it and say, well, if we were going to pull the trigger on it, like we're afraid of going forward for 3, 4, 5 years or whatever it might be, this is the time. But what I think is just sort of fascinating about this question too is like, what is enough? Like, if I knew I was going to get 55 games a year out of Anthony Davis, which is a lot of missed games. I mean, if 55 is not a lot of games. But if I knew I was going to get,
it's essentially a third of the season,
right? You're missing about a third of it. If I was going to, but I knew he was going to play like this. That's a very different question than 55 games where he's playing like even a conventional all-star, because those two things are very, very different. An MVP guy versus an all-star is not the same thing. And I don't think you can look at the future the same way when you try to figure out like which version you're keeping. To me, that's what makes this really interesting. I guess beyond the idea of like, if you really were that against the idea of going forward with him, theoretically, it's never going to look better than what he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, assuming it is sustainable between even now and April, and the fact that we're even having this hypothetical discussion, it underscores why it's all so tenuous. It underscores why other teams, even if he's playing at this level, if nothing else, will be wondering, hey, why are the Lakers looking to offload him coming off this level of production? They're not confident that this is going to sustain itself moving forward. So we need to have one hell of an infrastructure to absorb it, because, again, coupled with LeBron, and I agree with you, by the way. I mean, I would be looking to, whether or not you think this is truly a championship caliber roster, and for what it's worth, I don't know if they're championship or not, but I think it's a really good roster. I think the work Rob Pelinka did between Rui Hachimura and the deadline and where we are now is pretty damn near miraculous in terms of transforming what was a very dysfunctional team into one that makes a lot of sense. But you mentioned like the 55 games of AD at this level. It's a really good player, except you're not 100% confident you'll get 55, but B, coupled with the games you're expecting LeBron to miss, if the timing of this does not work out really well and you don't get those games to basically play out and be available when they are, you're setting. So you're
still very nervous then about. Don't answer this question. We can do it on the other side of the break. You're still, even with the improvements that they've made, are you reticent? How reticent are you about going into next year with this group? Like, what would you do? Would you explore, given what you're saying right there, given all the risks, given all that, would you go ahead and explore the idea of breaking up the Anthony Davis, LeBron James core, regardless of what they do this, the rest of the season and and potentially maybe even into the playoffs? That is the question I want you to answer next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by Nissan, and Nissan's most electric player of the week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, and the award goes to, hey, Anthony Davis. To put it mildly, the dude we are discussing right now has been electric while pushing the Lakers into the play-in mix. 39, 8-6 against the Warriors, spoiling the return of Steph Curry, and then 30 points, 22 rebounds against the Grizzlies, often making it look easy with the smooth, elegant footwork, reminiscent of Pau Gasol, whose jersey was retired that night, but also power and strength, beasting down rebounds for second chance opportunities or to end a Grizzlies possession. This fierce version of Anthony Davis could be the difference between the Lakers actually getting a playoff spot or missing the play-in altogether. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com.
Okay, so given, like, let's just say the hypothetically, this is what happens. They play well. They make the play-in. They make the playoffs. They put a good performance together. In the first round. It could be against two really good teams. They could lose, whatever. But like, this core and those, particularly Anthony Davis, is doing this until the Lakers are done playing this year. That's his peak value. The injury risk, like you say, stays the same going forward into next season. We've talked a lot about potentially, the idea of, would you want to trade Anthony Davis or look into it? How would this impact like the way you think about Anthony Davis's future in LA?
I mean, if I had offers for him, I would at least listen, because the injury risks are always there. And if you are, in your mind, or potentially, I guess, trading him from his peak value, given where the Lakers are with LeBron and AD, and the idea that the LeBron part of it is going to end at some point, you have to at least listen. That being said, though, I would look to run this roster back, because I don't think they're going to be looking to break things up anyway. And regardless, I think this is as good a roster as they're going to realistically be able to put around LeBron and AD. I think they have a lot of optionality in terms of contracts that they could potentially trade to reconfigure things if need be. I think this is about as good a position as it's going to be. And I've said many times since the deadline, I like this roster a lot. If you're asking me if I feel totally confident in it, the answer is no, because we've seen too many reasons not to feel confident in it. Confident. I'm not talking about lacking confidence in its potential. I'm talking about lacking confidence in its viability. Again, there is a very big difference. For me, I would just say that I look at this, and if I thought that this was the Anthony Davis that I was going to get, I would be, because I don't think you're going to get, obviously, look, somebody comes over, offers Giannis for Anthony. Most likely, if you get an Anthony Davis offer, it's going to be draft picks. It's going to be this. It's going to be whatever. You're putting yourself into that place where, potentially entering the rebuild purgatory. Maybe the Lakers could spin all those assets into a different star or whatever it might be. But, you're looking at some sort of rebuild. You mentioned the first segment. Like, I would put off the inevitable rebuild, even with the risk, because this version of Anthony Davis is worth, that 55 or 60 game risk. The whole thing was just interesting to me, because we've spent so much time talking about, would you do you really want to go forward with Anthony Davis? In part because the version we were getting wasn't good enough. But this one is a whole different beast. And by the way, Andy, I don't think Anthony Davis has any interest in being traded or going somewhere else, because he would like to have his jersey retired, just like Pau Gasol. Yeah. He said that after the win over Memphis, that he wants to be part of that big man lineage. Reading a piece from Jovan Buha from The Athletic, that's a huge honor to be up there with the greats, and he deserves it to be up there. The list of big men that came through the Lakers organization and dominated and left their mark it's hard not to think about that. Obviously, I want to be in that category, in that group. Whenever my body tells me I'm done playing, hopefully I'm able to come back here and have that ceremony that Pau and the rest of the big men and other former Lakers have had. This is coming at a time when Darvin Ham has been referring to AD as Wilt Davis, Wilt being Wilt Chamberlain. It's cheesy but adorable. It's very cheesy. It's very Darvin Ham.
It's cheesier than Dennis the Menace, which was pretty cheesy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, LeBron has worked really hard to make that one stick. But that's AD is laying down that marker of aspiration for himself. I mean, it certainly was not a prediction that he'd be up there, but it was definitely a mark of aspiration.
It's good to hear guys talk about building legacies, in LA, and particularly, LeBron doesn't need to build legacy anywhere. He is fully made in every way, shape, or form. Anthony Davis is a weird combination of made. Like, if Anthony Davis walked away today, he's going to the Hall of Fame. Like, it's like that stuff. But like, where you think of him when it's all said and done, in terms of like the greatest players of all time and stuff like that, that's not set yet. And so, to hear a guy talk about building that tail end legacy with the Lakers is I think pretty cool to see. It would be cooler if you felt confident he could play 68 games a season, but that I was still I like hearing that kind of thing from Anthony. I like hearing him talk about things that require greatness to happen.
It's funny. First of all, hearing AD talk about this, it reminded me of how people used to debate whether Pau was even a part of the Laker big man lineage to begin with, not because of his talent, but because Andrew Bynum was the starting center and more of a classic center than Pau, who, he's now represented more what centers have evolved into. But like, at the time, the center spot was supposed to be the most imposing player on the court, like, other than Kareem, who was sort of his own category of imposing. But Pau was on the heels of Shaq, who was maybe the most purely imposing player of all time. And there was also the whole Euros are too soft to play in America narrative that eventually got disproved in part by Pau. So it was just funny even hearing AD talking about Pau that way, just because I can remember when that in and of itself was a debate. What I think also, though, makes this really tricky with AD, as far as where we are now and him laying out that aspiration, like, forget that Pau has one more championship than him, 2 more trips to the finals with him. He has way more winning than Anthony Davis as a Laker. Mm-hmm. Like, Pau was a part of 160 win team, 2 teams that almost won 60 games. Like, the only losing season he had was the one right on the heels of Kobe's Achilles tear. Dwight left, Metta got amnestied, Steve Nash had the audacity to not just retire and give up $9 million to benefit the Lakers. Remember when that was a controversy? It was the beginning of the Nick Young era.
Can you imagine, what human being would be like, who would be like, you know what? You're right. I just, I shouldn't take this money. Go bleep all the way off with that.
But people forget now because, you remember Pau so fondly, and Pau is such an incredible person. But, his last couple seasons with the Lakers were messy. They did trade him for Chris Paul and it got rescinded. They were nakedly, transparently auctioning him and putting him on the block and trying to move him. But, people were too busy hating Jim Buss and Mike D'Antoni to really focus anything on Pau. And Pau's last season, I looked it up, he averaged 17, 10, and 3 with 1.5 blocks. And he played 60 games, which for Anthony Davis would feel like a minor miracle. Mm-hmm. So just AD is really behind the pace in a lot of ways to get that number up there next to Pau's or I guess maybe next to LeBron's, and that discussion could be had.
And
even though AD, I think everybody would agree, in terms of pure talent, great as Pau was, Anthony Davis is a better player than
player. So what you're talking about here is
Pau's been a better Laker so
it's
far.
Where I want to go next. This is exactly where I would like to go next. Pau Gasol, Anthony Davis, LeBron James, Hall of Famers. Like, LeBron. I think it's not a hot take.
You ready to call that one?
I am. Maybe one more good season. We'll see. But what is their Laker legacy in terms of having their jersey retired? Is that something, I think, if you ask fans today, do they deserve it now? I wonder what that would be. If you ask, what else do they need to do for that to feel like something that ought to happen? Because their greatness aside, like you say, there's a difference between being a Hall of Famer and being a quote unquote Hall of Fame Laker. So let's ask that question next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a great taste and treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try yourself a Built Bar. The holiday season, it never ends. There's one after another, and they always do damage. And you got to eat a little healthier to offset it, but you don't want to, compromise taste, because that's the whole point of eating. That's why you got to try Built Bars. With Built Bars, healthy actually tastes great. It's perfect for, just the resolution to get yourself in shape, but covered in 100% chocolate. So that's awesome. Great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, coconut almond. They taste deceptively like a candy bar, but only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 17 grams of protein. That's the good stuff. And you don't even have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've talked about, ordering the Built Bars at Built.com. Still an option, but you can get them at your local Walmart now, the pharmacy section, or Sam's Club. Just however you want to get your Built Bars, order yourself a box with assorted flavors and enjoy.
So let's start with this. If you asked, and maybe we'll put this out maybe for Friday's show and come back to it, since the Lakers don't play Thursday, and give us a little follow up, and you guys can engage with us and the program, and we'd love to hear your comments about it too. If you took a poll out now and asked, do you believe LeBron James should have his number retired by the Lakers? What do you think the percentage would be?
I think it would be probably 75 to 80% yes.
Okay. Same question for Anthony Davis.
I would say 75 to 80% no.
Interesting. Okay. And I do think, like, if you phrased it, let's say they play for another 4 years in LA, like, obviously time matters here. But or do you think they will or should eventually have their numbers retired and all that?
Well, will versus should actually.
No, you're right.
Different questions.
It's just why? Okay, why do you think LeBron would be a yes right now and Davis would be a no?
Because
they both won one title with the Lakers,
right? But LeBron was the MVP of that finals. He set the all-time scoring record in a Laker uniform. He was particularly instrumental in shepherding the organization through the tragedy with Kobe's death. I mean, like, LeBron really admirably put that on his shoulders.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, he really volunteered for that weight. And he's LeBron. I mean, like,
yes, and that's what I was going to say. Like, and also he is I think the best basketball player to ever live. And so similar to Wilt, who was, to be honest, better.
He's also played more than AD. That's part of it too.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's been more available.
Yeah, but like I compare the LeBron thing to, in some ways, a little bit like Wilt. It's like, okay, were his best days a Laker? No, but pretty good. And and being Wilt factored into that that decision. So I agree with you that most people, and we'll see what the polls say, we'll put that out, but most people would say Anthony Davis, no, not yet. What has to happen for AD to be somebody that Lakers fans say, yes, that jersey should go up in the rafters? How much more time needs to be spent in LA? How much more winning needs to happen in LA?
I mean, I think first and foremost, there simply has to be more winning. Like, put this in perspective, by the way, too. When Wilt's number was retired by the Lakers, I just looked this up as we were talking. It was 1983. So the Lakers, they had been a successful organization, but they were not yet the Lakers in terms of everything with the mystique and the prestige. That was still in the first half of the Showtime era. They had won 2 championships, with Magic and Kareem. Like, again, they were successful and they were just starting to really become like a thing that was reshaping the league. But they weren't quite the Lakers. And the reason I bring that up is just because when you mention, Wilt having done relatively less as a Laker, but he's Wilt. If, say, the Lakers already had all of the Showtime championships, banked, and maybe the 3 with Kobe and Shaq, Wilt could potentially not be as much of an automatic entry. You know what I mean? Like, just the idea that he's Wilt might not carry the same weight in 2006
completely
as it
agree.
would have in 1983. So I think that's worth considering. But AD he has not done enough winning, nor been seen as the leader and focal point of a championship team, combined with all of the injuries. Obviously, it's not his fault, but the standards are really high with the Lakers. And even if you want to say that LeBron's stature means there's a certain degree of politics that could affect this with LeBron, like, he's LeBron James, and at one point he's either going to be like a part owner of Clutch or a part owner of a team. Like one way or another, you might feel like you need to do this beyond the stuff that he did as a Laker. He's LeBron. AD is not likely to have that stature or those politics.
So, I agree with you, and I could be completely wrong in how I'm kind of reading the crowd here, in terms of what I think the answers to these questions would be, because I agree with you. I think there will be much more acceptance of LeBron than Davis, because I feel like, injuries aside, LeBron's tenure has not been as bulletproof, I would say, as people hoped. He has certainly, age has caught up with him in that way. But performance-wise, I think it's been as advertised. Like, when LeBron has played, he has been LeBron. And I think the expectations for Davis were kind of different. Like, when he arrived in LA, he was supposed to be the sort of ascending player in his prime. And more than LeBron getting hurt, the frustration level with Anthony Davis among fans has always been higher, because it's not just he hasn't played. If he hasn't played, but every game he played, he looked like this guy, you'd be like, geez, it sucks that he can't put him. Man, like, he's playing great. Like you can't fault how, but there have been too many moments where you actually fault the play as well, where it just hasn't felt quite right. And I guess, like, if you're a Lakers fan, you approach this question the same way as you approach the way we were talking about Anthony Davis's, and the opportunity for him to have kind of a redemptive impact on his perception through the rest of this year. The same, I guess, holds for next year, the year following, the 3 or 4, probably in all likelihood, Anthony Davis is going to be a Laker. Probably, if you had to make a bet, I would bet that he is going to be a Laker for the next 3 years before I bet he wouldn't be. Wouldn't you?
I mean, he's under contract.
He's under contract for 2, and it means they keep him around for another one out. That he's going to somehow be here after the end of his current contract. I think it's more likely than not.
I would bet, if were I to bet on it, I'd bet on maybe the soonest where Anthony Davis could opt out of the final year and they could extend him. I think that's a real possibility that it happens, ASAP from their perspective in terms of when it's actually allowable. Write a bet on it. AD is going to be here a while.
Yeah. Last question I want to ask you, and like I said, leave us comments on the YouTube page at Cam Brothers, and we could bring this up again for Friday's show ahead of the Toronto game. How much do you think it matters that both LeBron and AD were sort of imports, mercenaries, however you want to kind of describe it, that Pau joined a homegrown team. The Showtime teams, not everybody was drafted by the Lakers necessarily who was on that team, but they joined a group. No, it was, but I'm saying like guys come in and out, or like but the core of like that felt like a team that was built. And whatever, you go back to the teams in the 60s, you understand what I'm getting at here?
Yeah. I mean, with Showtime, other than Kareem, who before Showtime began, he had been a Laker 4 or 5 years, or at least 3 years before Showtime began. Magic was drafted by the Lakers. Worthy was drafted by the Lakers. Coop, Byron Scott, I think Rambis. Right.
The core of this LeBron AD team, neither one of them had any real roots in LA, to speak of, like, I think that has an impact too on how people perceive whether or not they ought to be in the rafters.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think people found that 2020 team. I know when we covered them, we found them really pleasurable to be around. They were it was a fun, enjoyable, hardworking group, but the championship itself, there's a distance from it because it got played in the bubble and, there was a separation. This year's team, even as frustrating as they were pre-deadline, you had to admire the way they played hard. They busted their ass. I think if this team got essentially rolled over, there could be the formation of more attachment from fans to LeBron and AD. But if the winning doesn't follow, there's always going to be a mercenary feel to LeBron and AD. Like, it's not as bad as, say, like, KD and Kyrie, who treated the Nets as their plaything. Like, I think LeBron and AD have been very serious and professional about what they want to do with the Lakers. But like you said, they were outsiders, and they were outsiders who essentially controlled their entry into the franchise. That's different than the previous incarnations when it comes to like the championship legendary teams.
Locked On Lakers. Anyway, let us know what you guys think about it, because when we started, hearing AD talking about it, and then some of the chatter, like where these guys fit in Lakers history is an interesting question to me, and to you as well. Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you go to see the show and engage with us, engage with other Lakers fans. Make sure you leave your comments for Friday's show. We'll see everybody on Friday.